In 1492, a Genoese captain sailing west for the Indies finds nothing but open ocean where a continent should be, turns back at the edge of his supplies, and dies convinced the enterprise was a failure rather than the reason his name would otherwise have been remembered for 500 years. There is no accident here, no hidden landmass waiting to be found by someone else within the decade. In this version, the ocean really is what everyone feared it was, and Europe spends the next century looking for a western route to Asia that does not exist. The gold and silver that funded the Spanish Empire for 2 centuries never crosses the Atlantic, because there is no Atlantic crossing to speak of. Spain remains a mid-tier European power instead of the dominant force of the 16th century, unable to bankroll the wars against France and the Ottoman Empire that Peruvian silver made possible in the world that actually happened. Potatoes and maize never reach European fields, which means the population boom that potatoes alone are credited with enabling across Ireland, Prussia, and Russia simply does not happen on the same timeline. Famine remains a harder ceiling on European population for another century longer than it did historically. Sugar plantations still exist, but confined to the Mediterranean and Atlantic islands where they always had been, never scaling into the industry the Caribbean made possible. The transatlantic slave trade, as an institution moving millions of people, has no destination to move them to, and never grows into the scale it reached historically. Britain, France, and the Netherlands, denied a Western Hemisphere to compete over, redirect all of that colonial ambition toward India, Southeast Asia, and Africa instead, and the scramble for those regions starts earlier and hits harder than it did historically, because there is no New World left as a release valve for European rivalries. By the 18th century, Britain and France are fighting for control of India and the maritime routes to Asia with the intensity that, in the world that happened, got split between Asia and a new world. Both empires were also colonizing at the same time. Without that split, the wars over Bengal and the spice trade start earlier and consume more of both empires' resources than they did historically. There is no United States to speak of, because there is no continent across the Atlantic for English colonists to settle, rebel against a king, and eventually turn into an industrial and military superpower. No American Revolution, no War of 1812, no westward expansion, no California gold rush pulling immigrants across an ocean that, in this version, leads nowhere new. Russia, without competition from an emerging American power for Pacific influence, expands its own reach across Siberia and toward Alaska and the Pacific coast with far less friction than it encountered historically, since there is no American frontier pushing back from the other direction. The Industrial Revolution still happens in Britain, coal and steam power owing nothing to a new world that never existed, but the raw materials and markets that colonial America and the Caribbean once provided have to come from India, Africa, and Southeast Asia instead, intensifying colonial extraction in those regions well beyond its historical scale. Without the United States entering either world war, the 20th century's 2 great conflicts, if they happen at all in a recognizable form, are settled entirely within Europe, Asia, and their colonial holdings. Germany and Russia, or whatever powers occupy their roles, fight to an outcome nobody from outside the continent arrives to tip one direction or the other. By the 21st century, the world's dominant powers are not the ones history actually produced. Britain, Russia, and whichever nation absorbed the exhausted remains of a Europe fought over twice, alongside a rising China unburdened by a Pacific rival that, in this version, was never founded. There is no dollar as reserve currency, no Silicon Valley, no NATO built around an American core. Global power still concentrates, but around an axis that runs entirely through the old world, because the new one was never there to enter it. What do you think? Is a world without America more stable without a superpower stretched across an ocean, or does it just produce a different, equally dangerous set of rivalries in the old world instead? Drop your answer below. Subscribe for more what-if scenarios.